Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the Coming Down to Earth with Spirit podcast with me, David Hale. Like with Season 1, we will continue talking about all things spiritual in a real and down-to-earth way. So I hope you can join me on my podcast journey so you can learn from my own spiritual journey and experiences with spirit in order to help you on your own spiritual journey and development. So join me now as we get into this episode. Hi everyone, hope you're well. Thanks for coming back to the podcast and welcome to this listener questions episode. And in this episode, we're going to talk about signs from spirit because Rachel has sent a question in and I'm just paraphrasing now. And it's basically, can we demand that spirit show us a sign? Because some people are told different things from different mediums. So this episode, as always, is going to be my take on it from my experience and from my knowledge of working with spirit. So you may get a different answer if you speak to a different medium, but this is my take and my opinion on it. Now, when we talk about signs from spirit, we've all heard of the white feather, the robin, the red cardinal, the pennies, the coins, and all that jazz, right? We've heard all of that. And so they are some of the signs in which spirit can show you to let you know of their presence at that particular moment. But can we ask for a sign and expect for it to be shown to us? Now, the lovely Rachel who sent the question in has said that some mediums have told her that if you ask for a sign from spirit, they'll give it to you. And some have said if you ask for a sign from spirit, you're not going to see it straight away. And I have to go with the latter because, like humans, spirit have free will. And they have the free will to communicate whenever they want to communicate. They have the free will to show whatever signs they want to show. They have the free will to choose a time in which they want to communicate. And I say that because people want their loved ones to communicate straight away. A week after they've died, I want them to communicate. But actually, it's not up to us. It's up to spirit. We just need to wait to receive. Because with mediumship, we're not pulling the information from spirit. We are receiving the download and we are receiving the communication from spirit. And it's the same with a sign from spirit. We are receiving that sign. We are not pulling the sign in, if that makes sense. So we can ask spirit for signs. Of course we can. But we have to be open-minded to the fact that it's not going to come when we want it to come. Again, because it's not up to us, it's up to the spirit world as to when they want to send a sign. And I always put it this way. I would say to people, let's say you're wanting to hear from your grandmother, who was a strong feature, a strong person in character when she was living. Would you ever have demanded, in physical life, would you ever have demanded that your grandma does what you say? The answer is probably no way. So what makes us think that we can demand they do what we say just because they're in the spirit world? We can't demand. We can ask, but we can't demand. And I think we also have to be aware and have the open-mindedness to also understand that a sign is not going to come in a way that we necessarily feel it should. So if we're expecting a white feather, we may not get that white feather. We may get a sign in a different way. We might expect that if we ask our loved one to, place a robin on the fence in my garden, so we go to the window, start searching for this robin, you may not get it in that way. So we have to be open-minded enough to realize that signs will come in a way in which, one, your spirit family can do it, and two, in a way in which you are going to recognize it. So let's break that down a little bit. So if we first look at how spirits send a sign and what type of sign it is, the way I see it from my experience is that the sign you will receive will resonate with the type of personality of the person in the spirit world. So let me explain. I'm going to take my maternal grandparents. Now, my granddad in life was a joker. He would play tricks. He was known as the wind-up merchant because he was that kind of character and personality. Whereas my nan, his wife, she was a strong Irish Catholic woman, but her personality was very different to my granddad. She had a softer energy to her. She wasn't a trickster, anything like that. So if I look at the signs that I've received from both of my grandparents, as has my mum, my grandfather is going to send signs which are more, I don't know, let's say less delicate, or there'll be signs which relate to some part of his life. So for example, multiple times, both my mum and I at separate times and separate locations have smelt his tobacco smoke. And obviously tobacco smoke has a very distinctive smell, but we've both smelt it on different occasions. And he liked his pipe. He was always known for smoking his pipe, and this tobacco, I think it was Golden Virginia tobacco we put in there, we'd smelt as kids because they'd smoked for years. So I remember going back to when I was a kid, he'd always smoked that tobacco. And I remember it was after my nan died, he'd died like 9 years before. She'd passed away, and my mum and I and my brother and my sister, I think, went to the house to get some paperwork or something that had to be dealt with. And as my mum opened the front door to the house, we both stepped in. She went to the kitchen, and I stood at the front door and I smelt that tobacco smoke. Now, bear in mind, there's no tobacco in that house. My granddad had died 9 years before, and I stood there and I shouted out to my mum and I said, "Don't tell me I'm the only person that could smell that tobacco smoke." And she could. And it's only there for 5-10 minutes, and it went. And that was a sign from my granddad to us to let us know that he is with us whilst we're going through the grief of losing my nan. And my mum had then confessed that before that, while my nan was still alive, I think maybe like the last week of her life, that she'd gone into the house because she was going to stay with my nan to look after her until up till when she passed. And my mum had gone up into the bedroom to put her bag of spare clothes in the spare room, and as she stood there, she smelt tobacco smoke. That she had to turn around. She thought that someone was stood behind her smoking, and it was my granddad's tobacco smoke again. And that was only like a week before my nan passed. So again, we know that was my granddad's way of connecting with my mum through the smell of his tobacco smoke, the tobacco smell, which we were also familiar with. And it wasn't our imagination. No, I've got a perfectly working pair of nostrils, as has my mum. We were not hallucinating. We did not take hallucinogenic drugs. We knew that smell was very, very clear. And that was my granddad's way of letting us know that he was there. And on top of that, I talked about showing us less delicate signs. Because my granddad wasn't a delicate person, he's not going to show me a white feather or a robin, because to me, they are what I would call the more delicate, softer signs. He's going to do something else which really gets my attention. So for example, in my old flat, he had literally shifted. I know it was him because me and my other half were talking about him at the time having dinner, and he had shifted a book, a thick book, heavy book, off my bookshelf and onto the floor. And it was a book in which my nan would have liked, because it was based on Mrs. Brown's Boys, the Irish comedy. Now, this book was not hanging off the shelf. It was between other things. It wasn't like it was just loosely hanging there, sitting there. It had other things around it. But that book came off that shelf and landed face down on the floor. He's also messed with my light bulbs in my old flat. It was one morning I got up. The bathroom light didn't work, the main one, and the light above the mirror suddenly stopped working. So I showered in the dark that morning because it was during the winter time. I went out and bought some new bulbs, ordered a new bulb from Amazon, only to find that before I replaced it, I just tried it just in case, and the light bulb worked. And I knew that was him because that was 4 days before my nan passed. He's also physically poked me in the back, being the joker he is. I've a bit too much information here, but I'll tell you. I was going for a stand-up wee, just so you know, and I felt a poke in my back. And I thought, and my mind went straight to my granddad, but I did logically think, who's done that? Is it my other half being a silly bugger? But no, he was in the kitchen cooking the dinner, fully chopping his onions and whatever else I was chopping up. There was no one else in that flat. So I knew it was my granddad that poked me in the back. But those would be the signs that he would show me to let me know that he's here. Because again, he wasn't that delicate person. He's going to show me more, I guess, forceful, more obvious signs. Where my nan's sign is a robin. So whenever I get that robin on my fence really randomly, and my mum gets exactly the same thing, we know that is my nan just letting us know that she's there. So they're just a couple of examples to show that when we're looking at these signs, we can sometimes associate them with certain people because of the type of sign that they are. But we also need to be aware that they're not always going to give us a sign that we're expecting. I didn't expect him to, shift that book off that shelf and land it on the floor. I didn't expect him to play with my light bulbs, but he did. So we just need to keep an open mind as to the signs that we're receiving. And then if we talk about the second part of that, is when we look at the way in which that we receive the signs. I think TV, film, Hollywood doesn't do the work that I do, doesn't do it any favors, basically. And what I mean by that is films, TV, they show spirit communication or spirit signs as being obvious as a smack in the face, and they're not. They can be very subtle, but they can also come in a way in which we're not expecting. So let's say, for example, that you ask your loved one in spirit to show you a sign of, I don't know, a butterfly, right? And then let's say you go, I put this in my book actually, this example, and let's say you go for a walk in the countryside or down the park or whatever, and you're looking for this butterfly, and this butterfly does not appear, right? You then come back home feeling quite disappointed because you've not received the sign that you asked for. But then you sit down and you turn the TV on, and an advert comes on. The first advert you see has a big old butterfly on it. Now, that's your sign, but you dismiss it because you're expecting to see a real butterfly, when actually that butterfly can come in another way. It doesn't always need to be a literal thing. It can be, it comes up on the TV, or you pick up a magazine you've not read before, you open the page and there's a butterfly on the page. That is your sign. It's not always looking for those obvious things. So signs are not always going to come in a way in which we expect to receive them. And I always say as well, it's one of those things that, the more you look, the more you miss it, because you're looking for something really specific and the way you want to receive it, but spirit are going to use their free will to send it to you in a different way, in a different form. So we just need to keep our minds open as to how we're going to receive them. And again, at the end of the day, it's up to spirit. It's not up to us. We need to take the expectation off ourselves that we must receive a sign this way, we must receive a sign that way. Well, it's not going to happen. It will happen in a way in which spirit think that you're going to recognize it and know it is that person. So we need to remove all the expectation off ourselves and just to allow things to come as they're meant to come in. And also, if you do ask for a sign, it doesn't mean that you're going to see it straight away, which is why I come back to what I said at the very beginning. If we do ask for a sign, no, we can't demand it. But if we do receive it, it's not just going to happen there and then and just drop in your lap. It may happen a day later. It may happen a week later. It's not always going to come when we think that we should, when we think that we should receive it. So it's just keeping an eye on things, but not go looking, because again, all you're going to do, you're just going to miss it. But also remember that even if you don't receive what you think, you don't receive a sign, it doesn't mean that your loved ones are not with you. And that's another question I get asked over and over again is, I asked for a sign, I've never received it, so have my loved ones left me? Absolutely not. Your loved ones, again, they live in a different form of existence which lives alongside us, so they're never gone very far. But remember that we also have a physical life to live, and we need to be able to live a physical life without constantly being guided by spirit, because we're humans, we have free will, we have to make decisions by ourselves. Because I know a lot of people do ask spirit, if they've got to make a decision, what decision shall I make? What decision shall I make? And expect spirit just to drop a sign in our lap to tell us that's the right decision to make. Well, spirit are never going to tell us what to do. They will show signs to us so we know that they're around. It's more for our comfort, so we know they are with us. But they're not necessarily going to show us signs to tell us what to do, what decision to make. Again, because we are living a human experience and we have to make those decisions in life, as tough as they might be. Spirit, they're not here. They're not here physically. They cannot make those decisions for us. So we're not going to get signs which tell us what to do. You might get nudges, you might get nudges which make you feel like, oh, maybe that's where I need to go. But just keep that in mind, that if you don't get a sign from Spirit, it doesn't mean they're not there. They are there. But, it takes Spirit. It's hard, can be hard work for them to show us a sign, because they have to use their energy to manipulate something in order for that sign to come through. Do you know what I mean? So if you're expecting to see a coin or a penny, let's say someone in your family collected pennies or coins, and that might be a sign that you're expecting. It can take them energy to be able to place that coin in your path. So I hope all that makes sense. The only last thing I would say is, when you do receive those signs, just note them down so you can keep a record of when Spirit have shown signs to you. Have they shown a sign to you when you're going through a particularly difficult time? Have they shown a sign to you when indeed you have asked for it? Have they shown a sign to you when there's a special event coming up for the family or something? So you can then keep a track on these moments in time when Spirit really are close to you, and when they do really want to let you know that they are with you at this current time. So yeah, keep a note, keep a journal of them. That can be quite powerful, because you can then look back and go, well, wow, actually, look at all the times that my Spirit family have communicated with me directly. And that can be quite powerful and quite comforting as well. But that's it. I feel like I've answered that question. Thank you, Rachel, for the question once again. Look after yourselves, and I'll speak to you all soon. Well, there you have it. That's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed what you heard and you found it interesting. There are plenty more episodes to come, so stay tuned, and I'll speak to you all soon.